Hello and welcome to my second video about endgame studies. Today we are looking at endgames where one side has two pawns and the other side has nothing. So to make interesting positions out of it, usually the pawns are doubled, and we will start here with this first study here. It's from Kuzmichev from 2005, and it's actually one of the studies which goes the longest to draw, and it goes like this. Of course, white has to play king g1, like if there would only be a pawn on g3, king h3, king h1, g2, king g1, and now the idea is, of course, that after king g3 it's stalemate. King h4, king takes g2. I think here the original study ends, but if you go further and look what white has to do, white has to play only moves here. King g1 again, king g2, king g1, and now we would have repeating the position, king g2, and we have 8 moves which white has to play to draw the position. The next study is also from Kuzmichev from 2012. It's essentially similar to the previous one, it's just the king is on the other side, so nothing interesting here, it's just the same. And we again come to 8 moves. Now this one here, also from Kuzmichev from 2019, this one I find really interesting because here the pawns are apart, which usually is an easy win for the side with the pawns, but not with this distance from the pawns. So the pawns are 2 rows apart, and this is actually the worst. So if the pawns are connected like this here, then they can cover each other and it's easily winning. It doesn't matter where the black king would be. If they are one file apart, then they can also like save themselves if you put them like on h6 and f5, and white can only approach the f pawn. White can never take the h pawn because the f pawn would run, and he can only approach the f pawn by playing king h4, king g3, king f4, and then black's h pawn would run. And if the pawns would be like 3 rows apart, then they are so apart that the white king cannot capture them both. So black would have all the time needed to bring the king. But if the pawns are only 2 rows apart, there is actually the possibility that white can force to capture both pawns. And here, even though the black king is very close, white can do that, or at least capture the e-pawn. So the first catch is already the first move, because if you go for the natural king g4, then we have king g6. These 2 squares are mined. And now white has to move, white is in Zugzwang, and after king f4 the black king can step forward, king takes e4, king g4, and now the black king shields the white king. The white king cannot approach to the h pawn, and the h pawn can march through. So instead white should play king h4, and now black has 3 possibilities. So let's look first at king g6. So here we would have king g4, and now it's just a draw because black king cannot go forward. Black has to move. If he moves h5, for example, then king f4, and now the black king cannot go to h5 any longer. So white captures the e-pawn and comes back to the corner in time. If h5, then king g3, and now that's the issue with the 2 rows apart. White's king can approach here. If the black pawn would be on f4, this would not work. You cannot approach. If the pawn would be on d4, then you take so long that the black pawn could go forward. But with 2 rows apart, you are able to capture the e-pawn, and the h-pawn is not able to go to h3 in time. So if h4, then we would have king takes h4, of course, and if like king g6, then king f4, h4, king takes h3, king f3, and white draws. So the best try for black is king g7. Now again, we are not allowed to go to g4 because of king g6, same reason as before. So we go to g3, king g6, and now king g4. I already showed this. H5. If king f6, then king f4, h5, king takes e4. This is the original solution of the study. If king g4, h5 check, h4, and now black can force some only moves, and here also after 8 moves the position is drawn. So 8 consecutive only moves. I let my program run to find a study which would go longer, and I found one, but I'm not happy with it. Anyway, I will show it, and this is the result of my program. The solution is pretty obvious. White has to take the pawn on b2, and essentially this is just a study with only one pawn against nothing instead of 2 pawns. And this is similar to studies I showed in the last video. White just has the opposition and draws. And it will take 13 only moves until White achieves the draw. This is the longest study. I don't like it, but that's the way it is. Interestingly, it's less moves than with only one pawn, but it makes some sense intuitively. If the opponent has 2 pawns, then either you draw quicker by capturing one, or you don't draw at all. The reason why it takes longer, I mean, this is essentially a study with one pawn, but in the studies with only one pawn, the best or the longest solution is this position here, where king b1 is the solution, and of course you cannot create a position with a pawn on b1, so you cannot reach the same amount of moves. Yes. I also altered the program to say, okay, I want a position where the 2 pawns are longer, and the program found some positions where black has doubled pawns on the h file, and then it takes like 10 moves. I also didn't like that, because you just go to the corner and has to wait until black stalemates you on h1. So I think the best longest solution is already done by Kuzmichev. This study here, I really like this. It's a really nice position. So let's go on to the studies where White wins the position with 2 pawns. And one of the studies with the longest solution I found was from Grigoriev from 1935, so this is really nice. White has double pawns, has to ensure that black cannot capture both pawns before the white king is here. So the first move is g4, preventing king f5. So now the black king has to run this way, and this gives white the time to approach with the king, cover the pawn, king f7, king f5, king g7, g6, and now here, important to know, black has a stalemate idea with king h6. You cannot play king f6 because of stalemate. Instead, you have to sacrifice the more advanced pawn with g7, and you get a winning pawn ending with a g pawn. And as we know from the last video, it takes a lot of only moves with the g pawn. I will just go through them, because if you really want to know, just check the first video about the endgame studies. And it takes 16 only moves until white wins and can choose how to win, if by promoting to a queen or a rook. So 16 only moves. This is 2 more than with only one pawn. Then in 1970, Zoltan made this study, and I'm not sure if he was aware of it, but this is just a mirror version of Grigoriev's study. It's just exactly mirrored, and so we don't have to look at it. It counts as an original study because it's not the same, but it's just a mirror. Then we have this study here from Pogosyan's 1979. It's also similar to the Grigoriev study. It's a little bit different. Here you have to come with the king, because if you play b4, then black plays king c7 and takes both pawns, so king e2, king c7, then king d3, king c4, and again we have here this b6 trick, not going into the stalemate. And after king d6 we play b4, and now we have you have transpose to the Grigoriev study. It is mirrored from left to right, but it's essentially the same. And yeah, this study also goes 16 moves. And then I found this one, which is also a nice study from Kuzmichev in 2016. It's the same theme all over again. White has to go and cover the pawns with king b6, runs down, and then again avoid the stalemate and instead sacrifice the pawn. Sacrifice the pawn with g5, and white wins. This is only 9 moves because here, after the next move, white already can choose how to win. And I found with my program another study where we get to the 16 moves of the longest studies, and it's a bit similar to Kuzmichev's study in 2016. It's just one row up. The pawns are on third and fourth rank instead of second and third, and then here we transpose to the Grigoriev study, and we also go to 16 moves in total. So yeah, quite interesting positions. I think what is essential for this type of endgame is really here this stalemate trick and the counter trick of white to sacrifice the pawn. This is really important, and if you want to learn this position, I can recommend my Chessable course, Endgame Terminator, 4 pieces or fewer, where this important trick is shown. And again, I think this position is really interesting with the pawns 2 rows apart. It's very special that the black king cannot support his pawns here, although he is very close. This is really a marvelous study from Kuzmichev 2019. So thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.